Welcome to Blending the Family, the podcast. Topics can range from finding your faith, dating after divorce, and mental health. Here's your host, who was told by a guest at one time that he was a podcast influencer. How about them apples? Well, you know the truth about that statement. Tommy Maloney.
Welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for caring. All that good stuff. Hey, on this episode, we have Adrian Dater, who is a very, very well-known, as far as the hockey community goes. Well, this is me and my paper. I like paper. Adrian Dater is a hockey writer. But we talk more, not just about hockey, and that'll be in part 2. This is a 2-part episode. But we also talk about how Adrian mixed alcohol and social media. Okay? And let me put that aside. All right. I've been having technical problems, so I'm afraid that I just gotta get this intro done. Anyway. For 2020, I came up with a word. My word for 2020 is faith. F-A-I-T-H. Faith. And it is what you think it is, but it's not what you think it is. So, again, because I'm panicking that I'm going to have technical problems again, I'm just going to race through this. All right, so F. F stands for freedom. Freedom means to me the ability of not having a dreaded day job. Dreaded. Well, it could be a dead job, but dreaded day job. A in faith means aligned. Means I am aligned with not just my faith, but I'm aligned with blending the family as far as putting out good content, putting out good guests, things like that. I for faith is involved. I want to be more involved in my kids' lives. Getting towards the end, we have Becca, my bonus daughter, who is a senior. We have Connor, my son, who is a junior. So I want to be more involved in their lives. T in faith means tech. I've been doing, if you've been following me on LinkedIn, the Tommy Maloney, thank you for asking, and on Instagram and Twitter, blending family, I've been using a new headline video, I think that's what it's called, to help promote the podcast. And H for faith is home. I want to be home. Tired of being on the road and not being involved and not hanging out with the kids and all that good stuff. All right. Adrian Dater. It was funny. I was asking some of the dads at practice this week, have you ever heard of Adrian Dater? And they're like, yeah, we like him. He's a good writer. And I'm like, yeah, he is a good writer. Anyway, Adrian writes about the NHL for bookies.com. The longtime NHL writer spent 25 years. I can't believe it's 25 years. At the Denver Post, 20 of which as the beat writer of the Colorado Avalanche. Boo. Boo. Part 2, we talk about why I hate Colorado Avalanche. Okay. He also covered the Avs for the BSN Denver and was the lead NHL columnist. I can't pronounce that word for some reason. With Bleacher Report from 2013 and 2016, Dater has written 6 books, including the best-selling hockey book, which you should get. You definitely should get. Blood Feud, Detroit Red Wings versus Colorado Avalanche, the inside story of pro sports' best and nastiest rivalry of era. Listen, I used to play hockey. I used to be a goalie. The Red Wings and Avalanche rivalry, you had some really, really good goalie fights. I'm telling you. But I'm not a fan of that famous goalie for the Avs. Boo, boo. Rhymes with Roy. Adrian is also a regular contributor to was a regular contributor to Sports Illustrated from 2011 to 2013, and on 104.3 The Fan, here in Denver, Colorado. He is also the regular Avs dude on that radio show. Okay? There you go. Like I said, I'm afraid I'm going to have technical problems again. I just want to get this done, over with. Sorry, apologize. There you go. All right, let's get this to the Terry Crews part of this episode. We've talked about faith. We talked about Adrian Dater, our excellent guest on this episode. And now it's time for me to say, as Terry Crews would say, your success is my success. Let's go. Let's listen to Adrian Dater and how he got started as an NHL writer.
Warning, you're about to listen to a conversation, not an interview.
It was really cool listening to you guys tell stories of when you I can't remember who else was there other than you and Clint Malarchuk, but just talking about some of your hockey stories and all that. But I guess the first real question is what brought you there to that event?
Well, yeah. First of all, I was there with Pat Carnes, the former Avalanche trainer who I'd known, and I think Pat knew somebody connected with that thing with Clint. But I had known Clint already, so whether I had somebody else telling me, we can get in there or not, I think I would have been there because, I knew Clint, and he was somebody who I did a big article on, about his own struggles. And then I went through some of my own struggles, and he was, really great enough to call me, when I was, going through some tough times, and I'd talk to him about his own tough times. So we kind of bonded over that. So I was there to not only hear what Clint had to say, for my own benefit, but just to be there as a friend of his. And I know his wife was there too.
Joanie was there.
Yep.
She had her own. It was really cool because they did someone break it off as there was a men's part and a women's part. And if you want to go to either or, you can go to either or. But that was just wonderful. And the two of them were gracious enough to be guests on the podcast because I wanted Joanie's perspective. I want to know, number one, what's it like living with, Clint after all these years of his struggles, but how did she stay and how does she stay so strong during these ups and downs?
Yeah, I know. I was interested in what she had to say too. I mean, only what Clint went through was something that barely anybody could survive. And he'll joke about it too, that he's survived two, basic attempts on his life. But it's not a laughing matter, really. Joanie's the one who had to really go through that second one, and boy, she's a trooper, right? She's stuck through Clint through thick and thin, and I know Clint is so appreciative of her, and you can tell that bond's never going to break. Clint was somebody I identified with a little bit as a person, type A type, went through some struggles young, he had a rougher upbringing than I did probably, but, driven guy, has some stuff happen to him, always thinking too much. So we bonded no matter what. And I read his book, which is great, really, really good book that he wrote. Honestly, really, really good book that I'm a very critical guy when it comes to writing and reading. And I loved his book. So I thought, wow, this is somebody I do want to get to know a little bit better. And, his talk was great. It's funny, Clint was still he'd been doing some of those talks for a while, but it's funny that I saw he was so nervous before he went on. Even then, I mean, he always wanted to do a home run talk for everybody. And I remember how nervous he was. And, he was asking me afterward, did I do okay? And I'm like, yeah, of course you did. It was awesome. So that's my connection there, and Clint is a busy guy these days. I haven't kept in touch as well as with him as I should have the last year or two, but I know he's always there if I need him, and same with him with me.
Yeah, I'll tell you, he was very gracious because my son plays hockey. I know your son is 15. Is
Yeah,
that right?
15. Yep.
And well, number one, Clint was he autographed his book to my son,
Mm.
uh, and I bought his book specifically for my son because my son's a goalie, and I wanted my son to understand, uh, you know, I mean, I'm biased because I've played hockey and I played goalie, and again, I'm biased about that position. But I wanted my son to, know there are the dark times. I wanted him to know about Clint's injury and what Clint had gone through afterwards. And so I was there at an event because a friend of mine was help running it, and he knew how much I was a Clint Malarchuk fan, and I remember. I mean, I remember the whole incident. But Clint again was so kind with his time, and when I went up to him and I said, "Would you autograph this book for my son?" And he looks at me and goes, "You must be Tommy." I'm like, "Wow,
Yeah.
this is just so cool." So I mean, just a wonderful man.
Yep.
Would you be open enough, Adrian, to talk about some of your struggles? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Yep. Fire away. What do you ask a question and then I'll go there? But I'm sure you know a little bit about my background.
I and I think by the way, when I wrote you the email, can I tell you how paranoid I was? Going, gosh, I hope that I have the comma in the right place and a period in the right place.
Yeah.
Um, 'Cause I respect you so much as a writer, and I was just like, I know this is just going to be a basic little email, but I'm so paranoid because
I
I
know what
think
you
we.
mean. I know what you mean. I once wrote an email to Frank DeFord, the great late
Oh yes,
Sports Illustrated writer, who, I mean, technically, now I'm being very, very technical here. I was a colleague of for a couple of years at SI when I worked there as a stringer, as a part timer. But anyway, yeah, I brag about that. But anyway, I remember writing him an email too, saying, I forget what we were emailing about. Actually, I think it was about his book. Um, and yeah, I remember having like, better proof this one, Dater. Like, don't screw this one up because Frank DeFord was a guy I idolized as a kid. So, but thank you for that. You don't need to be so careful next time. I have more typos than anyone probably sometimes. So no worries there.
well, I do want to talk to you about writing a little bit, but as you mentioned, as I was alluding to, I know you've had your struggles. Um,
Yep.
how do you come back from failure?
Yeah, that's a good one. I've had failure before in my life, but nothing like I went through. You know, One night, I'm, you know, 25-year veteran of a big newspaper and six-time author, and feeling pretty good about myself in a lot of ways, and then um, literally overnight, it's over. For that part of my life, in a sense. I, s- I put out a tweet that was private. It was, not very smart of me. I was conversing with someone who, I'd had a conversation with for a couple years, really, as sort of hockey fan, that was, just somebody I conversed with. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I drank way too much one night. I was um, had a problem already with an addiction to sleeping pills. So, when you are not in your right mind, the lesson is you will do things that you wouldn't do in your right mind. And I didn't mean anything by it, nothing hurtful. I may be a sarcastic SOB a lot in my life, but I definitely like don't want to hurt anybody. Never have. I've always been a very apologetic guy if I ever think things have gone too far, etc. But I set a kind of inappropriate, flirtatious tweet to this person, and didn't think anything more about it. Forgot all about it the next day. Never would have dreamed in a million years it was. I didn't even remember it, first of all. But about 14 months later, another hockey writer out there had gotten in trouble with something he did online, and Deadspin wrote about it. And one of the things that Deadspin did was say, "Hey, if any of you know out there any other hockey writers have ever done anything wrong, send us a message. Send us a private, message." And so 14 months later, that private message that I sent was resurfaced to the world, and it made me look like a creep. And I was totally shocked in a sense because I don't remember saying it. And I'm sitting at a morning practice one day, and all of a sudden I start seeing, my messages on Twitter saying what a creep I am and a jerk, and and I'm like, what did I do? And then I see this, and it's like, oh my God, yeah, boy, that does look bad. And didn't end very well with me there after that. I lost my job. 1 minute I was covering a team in the NHL. 2 months later, I was shoveling snow as a substitute teacher in a parking lot, in a tough school district, which is a part of my long story back. In a way, I became a teacher for a while after that. But boy, talk about a swift fall. I had it. It was humiliating. It was everything I worked my whole life for was gone. I thought, and I didn't even really understand how. I didn't even know how fast it hit me. I was still, I was drinking too much. I had, I would say, a moderate drinking problem for a few years. And why did I drink a lot? Well, some of it may have been genetic, hereditary. I came from a long family of drinkers. Some of it was boredom at times. I think the years of travel kind of caught up to me a little bit. I was bored with the job itself for a little bit toward the end. I didn't really like working at the Denver Post those last couple of years. I was getting unhappy with everything there. So that kind of fed into kind of a, I guess I went through just like a, who gives a damn phase. And, I think that contributed to things. It turned out later on, I'd always had problems with, and I got some real help for this after this all happened. I basically have always had kind of and I got diagnosis with this basically kind of a moderate anxiety disorder with what the doctors told me was some OCD with it, and not the OCD where you're washing your hands all day long, but
right,
and I've always had this, and especially like just obsessive thoughts too much, anything negative happens, I'll obsess over it, or anything at all, anything that I thought was a problem for me, I would sort of just harp on it way too much and worry too much, and just stress myself out, and that kind of led to, I think, some of the drinking and the pills. I would often take sleeping pills just to go to sleep, just to get my mind to stop. Otherwise it would never stop. Like, I couldn't sleep. I was up for four straight nights on a road trip. Couldn't sleep 4 straight nights. I don't know if any of you out there ever had that, but it's hell. I just couldn't stop thinking about the fact that I wasn't sleeping. Like, it was just this awful vicious circle in my head, and that happened with a lot of stuff with me. So yeah, how do you come back from that? Well, I remember thinking at the time, as awful as this is, I remember saying this right to myself as like the next day, like, okay, Dater, as awful as this is, and as awful as I know this is going to be, you're going to find out what it really is like to be in hell now, and you're going to, in a sense, I know this sounds crazy, but I was almost, in a sense, saying, well, hey, at least it's going to be a new experience for me. At least I'm really going to know, and I'm going to find out, and I'm going to make it through. Did I have any suicidal thoughts? No, not really. It was bad, but I knew that I never thought I'd actually write again, though. I didn't think anybody'd ever hire me. Well, it turns out somebody did, and I've basically been writing, for about 4.5 years straight. The last 4.5 years, being paid for my work, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of hard moments to get over and learn from, but it was, I can sit here today, a little over 5 years after that day happened. I can honestly say that, I feel better about myself before or since, like, I made it through, and thanks to the help of a lot of people who helped me. But I actually feel better today about myself than I really ever have in a long time, like a long, long time. And some of that's just getting good help that I probably should have had before, especially talking about my problems and anxiety and all that stuff, and not drinking, 2-3 bottles of wine every single night like I was doing, So, I was always a little bit extreme all the time. I think I've learned to, be relaxed a little bit more in my own ways. And I still hate the fact that it happened. I still feel like it wasn't. I can't make excuses, though. I don't want to sit here and say, "Oh, I got screwed." I got what I deserved, in a sense. I also would say that I've never done anything like that to the real. I've never hurt. I would never, like, be a creep, in a sense, or be a weirdo. Like, I just I had that feeling, though, like everybody was thinking of me that way, and okay, I'm sure there will always be some people who think that. There's really nothing you can do about that other than live your best life and try to prove that you made a mistake and want to atone for it. And that's really what I try to do. Always tell myself. I always said, like, just try to make it a comeback story, dude. Just try to make it a comeback story, and eventually you'll tell the story. But it was rough. I mean, the first 2 years after that, I probably didn't go more than, I swear to God, like 5 seconds of every day where I didn't obsess about what happened. Like, it would just every 5 seconds, everything I would just replay in my mind. It was awful, but you get through it. So here we are.
Well, Adrian, I want to say thank you so much for. I didn't know if you really wanted to talk about it. I mean,
yeah, I wouldn't have for about 4.5 years or 4 years, but
but thank
I've come to the point where I can actually talk about this, and be honest about it. I mean,
What kind of conversation? Because I'm because it still is somewhat in your mind, still somewhat fresh.
yeah,
Did you have a conversation with your son about this? Because you know we're in that world where
yeah.
it what happens on Twitter, boom, it's out there.
Um, Not a lot of deep talking, but everybody knows, and he does too. And I just tried to say, Dad made a mistake, and but maybe everything wasn't all what you may think about it. And that's true. That's true here too for everybody else. Like there was some stuff. It wasn't it was it wasn't a ton of like articles on it, but there were a few articles about what happened to me, and I'll tell you, half the stuff that was in it was wrong. And so I learned that too. That chances are, is whatever journalist writes is it's going to have some errors in it, and there were some errors in stuff about me and this whole thing. You know, so yeah, that's tough, and that's obviously my first thought was when this all happened was not just my son, but my wife, who I'm still happily married to, and she's the best. Heidi, she is my rock, and I'll never be able to be as good as her in every way. And she's always known that, but especially coming through that, and that was something we both went through together. She knows the real me. I think that you know I screw up at times, but I know that I'm not a heartless, bad, evil person. You make a mistake, and I have to have a kind of a public one. And I'm just grateful that people gave me another chance, in a sense, to show so that I could come back from it. Because not everybody else would have done that. That doesn't mean that listen, I was always a really prideful guy who had a long memory in a lot of ways. There's still some people out there that I don't forget what they like. The old cliche is you definitely learn who your real friends were. Yeah, I'd learned that too. And there's some people who were pretty quick to dump on me after this all happened and dance on my grave a little bit. Now that I've come back 5 years later, a couple of those people are trying to be nice to me again, and I'm like, yeah, I know what you did, dude. It's not going to work. I'm not going to go out and call them out, but I'm just not going to deal with those guys again. And you definitely learn who real friendships are. I'm not the greatest guy with that either way. I'm the lapse person with everything. I'm bad with birthdays, cards, presents. And I'm no one to judge people who don't aren't on my doorstep every day trying to but I yeah, I learned that real friends are who I really care about, and the people who care about me are the ones I care about the most, and and the rest is mostly just noise.
I will say, because you brought it up, happy early birthday.
Oh, thanks. 50, 55, man. It's I don't know what to say to that. I always thought of myself as like 16 years old forever.
But
I think I still think of that.
you've got the perfect profession for that.
I
You
know,
really do.
I know. You're right. I know, because you're always kind of just, you know, right. As a writer, you're always kind of like you can invent something new every day. I know, even though you don't really. Not as a hockey writer, you kind of write the same thing over and over, but yet technically it is different every day.
Right. And again, you're really good at it.
Ah, thank you, man. That's kind. I never. That was one of my problems too. I could never accept. I had low self esteem. I think kids who come from and again, I'm not going to be the guy who blames it on a upbringing. My parents got divorced, at age 5, 3 or 4, 3 to
No,
5.
whoa.
Yeah.
That's. I want to do a study one day. I
All right.
gotta, because I was the same age, and my son same age when his mom and I got divorced. So I'm with you, and
Mm-hmm.
sounds like very similar upbringing. My dad
Yeah.
drank,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like you were saying, Adrian. You don't want to put excuses out there,
Yeah.
but there are legitimate excuses of some of the shit we do.
Well, yeah, you know, you can clinically say that and know that.
Right.
I love my parents though, and I don't want to ever feel like I'm blaming them for anything. It's just everybody got divorced in the late '60s, early '70s.
Yeah.
That's I was
Who's the
I was
kid?
a latchkey kid as in the early '70s, and that's where
Yeah.
most of my friends were the same way.
Yep.
Um, but it was hard. I do remember the day my dad was telling my mom that he didn't want to be with her anymore, and I was just sort of sitting there in the back of in a different room, going, "Oh my god, what's this? What does this mean?" I must have been, 5 years old, and I remember the being scared by that. Where's he going? Um, it was you don't realize how that's going to affect you till later. I was very insecure growing up, very insecure, very worrisome kid, always worried about something. Um,
But how did you get into writing? I mean, I feel like
yeah.
I'm talking to myself because I am the same way, Adrian. I mean, I don't. I'm trying to do better as far as putting out my writing more. I went back to. I have a subscription to Medium. I'm starting to put, more content out there.
Mhm.
So how do you, go through those insecurities, end up becoming a writer?
I mean, it was, I have to, mostly credit. I mean, being an only child, it means you're going to be in your head more. I would say a
Exactly.
lot of writers were only children. Um, there was nobody else to hang out with for much of the day except me. you know, uh,
Oh my gosh.
I would come home.
Kindred spirits, Adrian. We are kindred spirits.
Well, I think that's very common though. Like kids, guys my age, your age,
Our
our
age.
age are. It's a very, very common upbringing. It's a very common story. So many divorced kids of that era, and still are. I mean, I think it's still 50% the divorce rate. Uh,
Right.
Maybe a little less today, but not much.
I mean, it does fluctuate between like the 50s
Yeah,
and high mid 40s.
yeah, I know, and I've been divorced myself. I've been divorced. I've been married twice. Once before on an early marriage that was stupid. Like we won't get into that one, but yeah, I've been married before. Um, did it too young. Wasn't thinking too much, and I don't. So you're a young kid. You're in your own head. You got nobody else to hang out with. I did have friends. I played a lot of ball. Always playing ball as a kid. Uh, so, number one, you're by yourself a lot. You have to use your imagination more. That tends to produce something in your head that makes you able to write. I think better. You're able to, you have your thoughts in your head that are really imaginative. Um, if you're lucky enough to get a decent education as a young guy or young person, man, woman, you you have to have those basics first. I had good grammar skills. I could spell very well. I could read well at a young age, so that's a big head start. If I don't have books to read as a kid that my parents gave me, I don't take up reading as early as I did. I think I was reading by age 5, pretty like couple actually adult books really like not adult books like that, but
Yeah. Right.
like I remember reading the book about the Andes survivors. I think no, it wasn't at age 5, probably like age 7. Um, the Andes survivors and the Andes mountain crash.
Right.
Fascinating book for me as a little kid. Like wow. Uh, Sherlock Holmes mysteries I was reading at age 5 or 6 or 7. But but the biggest thing was, I wasn't really a jock sports lover until like age 5 or 6. But then I got into sports heavy and I read newspapers. And I grew up where there was a very good sports section called the Boston Globe, and
I was just going to say, you were in New Hampshire.
I got the early edition Boston Globes for all those years. I always read the early edition game stories of guys like Bob Ryan and Lee Montville and Will McDonough, Peter Gammons on the Red Sox. That was a massive influence on me. I've always said this. Big time influence. Just great sports section, great writing, great interest. It just, captivated me every day. Like, just couldn't wait to read the newspaper as a little kid. So you combine that with a kid, it's in his head a little bit, imaginative kid. I always felt like writing, I could, I always felt like I was, in a sense, like, I always felt confident doing it. I felt like I was speaking my mind, in a sense, if that makes sense. What was in my mind was coming out on paper, and it felt easy to me. So, but how I got to be a writer after that professionally is a long and twisted story, too. I really had no clue what I was going to do getting out of college. Like, none. I was a luggage sales. I worked in a luggage store right out of college. I was a luggage clerk. Right out of college. I had no clue how to do anything. I was the most adrift, clueless guy you'd ever imagine at age 21, 22. So that's another long story.
So you're selling luggage, but you had to have that inner passion. You knew that somewhere in the back of your mind that writing was your thing.
Not really. I hadn't done much writing in the last 3 or 4 years. In college, I took all the right journalism classes, and I did well in my classes. But I'm telling you, I had no idea once you got out of college what you're supposed to do. I was just a guy who was just like, what do you do now? I don't understand it. I was so ill-equipped in so many ways for real life. It would shock you, I just didn't know what was beyond my little small town in New Hampshire, in a sense. I was a kid who just, I kind of, I didn't take college as seriously as I should have, partly because I had this girlfriend named Sheila who I was obsessed by, and we had a long 3-year courtship in college, and we was always either, breaking up one day, getting back together the next day. It was always drama for me. I was the absolute basket case at all times. Part of my obsessive mind was, that's where the obsession, the OCD started. I get a girlfriend in college. I'd never dated, didn't even go on my first date till like age 20. And, first relationship, right? It's always hard, but I didn't know anything. I thought, God, this is it. This is all I'll ever get. So every day was an obsessive compulsive disorder in my head about her. It was always about Sheila, trying to get her back, win her back. I mean, I did some crazy things. Like I gave up a TV internship in New Hampshire that I had all lined up at the local station there. I was going to be a TV star, right?
Right.
I was accepted into the internship program at a fledgling New Hampshire TV channel. For sure, I would have been like a sportscaster on that at some point. I was going to be a sportscaster, I thought. That's what I really thought I could do. And I chucked it all to chase Sheila around Cape Cod. I was a timeshare salesman for 2.5 years, basically summers and winter breaks every weekend. Sheila would break up with me. I'd win her back. It was just constant. So yeah, actually, I'm going to have Sheila on a future podcast. By the way, we're obviously this is a long time ago,
Right.
late 80s. I am not obsessed by Sheila anymore, folks. it's but it's something I can love. But at the time, like, I couldn't focus on anything except, oh my God, it's over, my world has ended. I was that kind of guy. Oh my God, it's so weird when you think back how stupid you were. Like, I just, uh, but yeah, when I got out of college, I moved back home to Concord, New Hampshire. I had no place else to go, and my parents are like, "All right, well, you're not going to just sit here and sleep all day. You're going to have to go out and get a job." I'm like, "What's a job?" And your humble hockey writer here was an employee of the Suitcase from, I think, October of '88 through roughly, no, I'm sorry, about July of '88 through roughly October of '88. I worked in a luggage store for $6 an hour. I was horrible at it. I couldn't gift wrap. I couldn't mingle with customers very well, and I got fired. I got fired from that job. So the couple days later, I was like, "All right, what do I do now, dude?" I actually walked into the local newspaper. Which, dude, why didn't you do this 2 years before or something, like on an internship or something? Walked into the Concord Monitor, New Hampshire newspaper, state capital, very good newspaper. And I walked into the front door and I said, "Can I have an application, please? I'd like to apply for anything." And it's the classic story. That very day, when I handed in my application, a woman came out from the back. Her name was Kate O'Brien. And she was the manager of the pre-press department at the Concord Monitor. And she actually came out with my just completed application. Obviously, they were desperate for anybody. So she said, "Would you be interested in a proofreader position with us?"
Were you making more than $6 an hour?
I actually got a raise to $6.50 by the time I left. Yep. So
Yeah.
$6.50. Well, it was awful in a sense because I was in the back shop of the newspaper, right? Nobody who works there really has a journalism degree. Yeah. God bless them. There were some great people I met in those times, though, back in that back shop. Oh my God, there's so many. I should all just do a novel someday about all the characters I met in those early days of the newspaper business. So finally I got up the courage one day to walk into the managing editor's office, completely cold. Like, everybody had always told me how smart I sounded about sports, and I was always the guy who was hanging around talking about sports with the sports writers at the water cooler, right?
Right.
But yet I'd go back to my lowly perch while they'd go back to the newsroom. I'm like, damn, that sucks. What do I need to do? I have a journalism degree. So I walked in cold one day to this managing editor's office, and I said, "Gosh, I'm literally shaking like I'm knocking knees. I'm literally stuttering my words." And I said, "God, I just, I would love to just, if I could get a job writing somehow, I know maybe I could do it, And to his everlasting gracefulness, his name is John Fensterwald. He's still on Twitter. I think it's Jay Fensterwald. He's a journalist who works about education in California now. But at one time, he was like a assistant editor at the Concord Monitor. I think he went on to the Baltimore Sun as a number 2 editor. He let me be. He said he let me basically write sports for the sports department as a stringer. $30 a story, which to me was a princely sum.
That is.
And I wrote.
Hey.
Yeah, I got the chance to go out. I'll never forget my first story was Babe Ruth League baseball game. Conquered like eighth graders against the rival town or something, and it was an afternoon paper, so I didn't have to write that night. But I was able to come in the next morning and actually do it in the newsroom, which was like, wow, there he is in the newsroom all of a sudden. what's he doing over there? All the pre-press people. And long story short, I got 12 bylines to my name working for the Concord Monitor, and then they fired me there too.
Oh, what happened?
I think it was a cost-cutting move. I think I can't prove this. I think the person who hired me in the pre-press department was a little bit jealous and pissed off that I was writing for the quote-unquote, newsroom where I was, who does he think he is?
You're on the other side of the wall, Adrian. That's why.
Who does he think he is, kind of thing, Because I was still doing the proofreading job, too. The sports writing thing was just on the side, but I was like, of course, I'm like, that's all I thought about was the writing thing. I mean, that's once I got a taste of it, like, oh my god. Why was I fired though? Yeah, I was fired because I think it was a cost-cutting move. Number one, the actual newspaper business in 1991 was pretty bad for a while. There was a pretty big recession back east, especially at that time. Yeah, and I think they were looking to knock somebody off, and but that's how I ended up in Denver a few months later. Which
so you after the Concord, you came to Denver. Did you go right to the Post?
No. You think anything's in my life? You think anything's been simple in my stories to this point?
Never.
No. No. I had. It's too long of a story. It would take you 4 hours to do this podcast, but essentially, I had a friend who was moving to Denver. Coincidentally, just at the same time. It was my best friend Chris from New Hampshire. He had a girlfriend that she had family out in Boulder, and she convinced him to move to Denver in 1991. He's my best friend from high school and everything. Still is to this day. I'll probably be seeing him in about 2 weeks from now, actually. So they moved to Denver. I get asked at the Concord Monitor. I kind of wanted to move on anyway because now the sports writing thing is cut. Like the sports writing thing was cut before I got fired from the pre-press job. They said that they couldn't afford the $30 anymore for me to write stories, and so I didn't lose both jobs at once. The sports editor said, "God, we really like what you do. Like you have talent, but the management has told us to cut, and we can't afford to pay you anymore as a stringer." Which I'm like, oh my god, what is the odds? So I moved to Denver in May of '91. I did not have a job at the Post. I worked odd jobs for a little while. I was still collecting unemployment from the state of New Hampshire. My rent was $160 a month. I think I was getting $531 a month from the state of New Hampshire. So I was rich. I did a few odd jobs. I wrote for a couple really weird weekly papers. One of them was called Colorado Tennis. So I did some Colorado tennis work. And one day I walked into the Post blind and asked if they had a job for me. The high school sports editor met with me. He said, "I don't have a job for you. Sorry." And I went on my way. A week later, he called and said, "Do you want to take scores over the phone, high school sports?" And I said, "Sure." I was sitting in my awful little apartment at the time. My roommates had moved out by then, I think. They'd moved away. No, actually, no, they were still there. What am I saying? And I started taking high school scores over the phone, and one thing kept leading to another. How I got the hockey job, that's another fluke. But I feel like I'm talking way too long here all of a sudden.
Wait. Please leave a rating and review. However you get this podcast, whether it's through the mail or from your neighbor or listening in under the couch. I don't know. You tell me.